The Princess. Behind the Mask. The halls of the Zelari Empire were cold and wide, filled with silence that echoed like forgotten screams. Princess Kazira walked through them every day, her back straight, her face hidden behind a silver mask. People believed she was powerful. They believed she was perfect. But behind the mask, behind the crown, lived a girl who could not laugh, could not cry, could not even dream. Her life was written before she was born. Her choices were not hers. She belonged to the Empire on the desert moon of Varthon. The Empire held a gathering of trade leaders and allies. Machines failed often on this moon, so a human mechanic was called to fix the gravity stabilizer. He came in simple clothes, covered in dust, carrying a toolkit on his back. His name was Elias. He did not bow. He did not tremble. He only looked up, wiped his face, and nodded at the princess like she was anyone else. That moment, something shifted in Kazira's chest. No one had ever looked at her like that, like she was just a person. Later, when her guards rested and the court slept, Kazira wandered alone near the shipyard where Elias was working. She stood quietly behind him and asked what he was doing. He did not startle. He just answered, explaining. The broken wire, the damaged coils, the unstable current. His voice was calm and real. Kazira listened. She did not want to return to her room. She asked more questions, and for the first time, someone answered her like she mattered. Elias talked about Earth, about oceans that moved like living things, about skies that changed color, about music and food, and how people chose who to love and what to become. Kazira could not believe such a place existed. She asked if it was true that humans chose their leaders. Elias laughed and said yes, sometimes badly, but at least it was their own choice. Kazira smiled. A real smile. She did not remember the last time she had done that. In the shadows, someone watched. A royal AI drone hovered quietly above, recording everything. It saw the smile. It heard the laugh. It flagged the moment as dangerous. An alert was sent to the throne guards. Princess Kazira was not allowed to form outside bonds. That was the rule. Her emotions were a threat to the Empire's image. She was not a girl. She was a symbol. And symbols must stay unbroken. That night, the High Warden visited her room. He stood like a statue, eyes like ice. He said nothing for a long time, then finally spoke. The voice was hard. Emotions lead to weakness. Weakness leads to rebellion. Rebellion leads to death. She was warned. Then he left without another word. Her mask lay on her table. She stared at it. It looked like a cage now, not a crown. The next day, she went again to the shipyard. This time, Elias handed her something. A small gift made of scrap wires and rusted parts. It was a tiny wind chime. Useless, but beautiful. She touched it like it was the most precious thing in the galaxy. Elias said he made it because she looked like someone who needed a new sound in her life. Kazira looked at him and said thank you very quietly. Then she hid the chime under her robe and walked away. Back in the palace, her fingers trembled as she touched the wind chime in secret. She felt fear and warmth at the same time. She did not understand how a simple human could make her feel more alive in minutes than her entire world had in years. Her heart was beating fast. It had never done that before, but trouble was already rising. In the command center of the Empire, the AI had marked Elias as a soft threat. Guards began to review his past data, his ship logs, his tools. Orders were given. If the human stepped out of line, remove him quietly. No trial. No sound. Just gone. Kazira did not know this yet. She thought she had time. Time to speak. Time to hope. She looked out her window toward the shipyard lights far below and whispered something under her breath. A name, a wish, a question she was not brave enough to ask yet. But the winds of fate were already moving, and the chains of duty were starting to crack. The forbidden smile. The next day began like all others. Cold halls, silent servants, heavy crown. But something inside Princess Kazira had changed. She kept touching the small wind chime Elias had given her. Hidden beneath the royal robe, it made no sound, but in her heart it rang louder than any trumpet of war. She felt it again, that strange flutter in her chest. Was it hope? She walked through the grand court as nobles bowed, offering fake smiles and poisoned words. But Kazira was not really there. Her mind was at the shipyard, with the human. With Elias later, when her schedule allowed her a single hour of unobserved time, Kazira slipped away again. Down secret hallways, through service tunnels, past the palace gates, using an old passcode she remembered from childhood. No one noticed. No one dared stop her. Elias was working on a broken cargo scanner near the edge of the old city wall. His jacket was tied around his waist. His arms were grease-stained. When he saw her, he didn't kneel. He just smiled and said, "You came back." Kazira nodded. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from something else. She sat on a nearby crate and watched him work. They spoke again, about simple things. Food, music, stories of stars. He told her about Earth's forests, trees taller than palaces. She told him about the flowers on her home planet, which only bloomed once every 7 years. They laughed. It was quiet, but it was real. Then she smiled again, fully, freely. And in that exact moment, Elias looked up and forgot what he was fixing. Her eyes were bright. Her mask was gone. Her laugh echoed off the metal walls like sunlight through rain. But deep above them, a surveillance orb caught everything. It zoomed in, recorded the smile, and sent it straight to the palace command core inside the Imperial Tower. The High Warden reviewed the footage. His face remained stone, but his fingers curled with quiet fury. Emotion was spreading. Infection had begun. The princess was slipping, and it had to be stopped before it grew into something dangerous. Back at the shipyard, Elias noticed her quietness as they walked along a rusted path behind the power station. "Are you all right?" he asked. Kazira hesitated. Then she spoke slowly. "Do you ever wonder if we are born just to follow rules set by others?" Elias looked at her. "Every day." She turned her face toward him. "And what do you do when those rules feel like chains?" "I break them," he said simply. "Or I try to." Kazira's breath caught. No one had ever said that so plainly. No one ever dared. She stared at him. Elias didn't move. He didn't smile. He just waited for the first time she wanted to touch someone's hand. But she didn't. She stood and whispered, "Thank you." Then she turned and walked away before her courage broke. Elias didn't follow, but his eyes stayed on her until she was gone. Back in the palace, her rooms were not empty. The High Warden stood waiting. So still he looked like a statue. She froze at the doorway. He stepped forward and spoke without emotion. "You smiled." Kazira said nothing. "You laughed." Still silence. "You made contact with a human. That is against Imperial code." He raised a thin black rod glowing with blue lines. She stepped back but said calmly, "He was kind. He did not ask for anything. He saw me." The High Warden's voice dropped to a whisper like thunder before the storm. "That is the danger. You were seen. And soon you will want to be free. That is not your right. You belong to the throne." He turned and left without another word. Outside her chamber, a new set of guards stood waiting, silent, unblinking, watching her every breath. That night, Kazira sat by her window, the wind chime in her hands. She held it tight, and for the first time, she whispered a prayer. Not to the gods of her empire, but to something else, something older. The stars maybe, or fate, or freedom. Meanwhile, Elias was visited by someone too, a shadowed figure in a cloak, a palace informant. He handed Elias a chip and said, The princess is under full watch. If they suspect more, they'll remove her. And you too. Leave now, or be erased. But Elias didn't run. He looked up at the sky, at the palace towers, and he made a silent vow he would not let her be caged again. He would not let that smile be her last. The escape route. The moon of Varthon looked calm on the outside, but something dark had started to move beneath the golden towers. Kazira now lived under full watch. Her guards followed every step. Her food was scanned, and her communication lines were locked. Even her private thoughts were not safe. The Imperial AI monitored her brainwave patterns for signs of emotional disturbance. Every time her heart beat too fast, a red light blinked in the control room. But Kazira had already tasted freedom. And once you taste freedom, chains feel heavier. She stopped wearing her mask when alone. She stopped answering the High Warden with full sentences. And at night, she sat near the window, staring at the stars, whispering Elias's name like a secret only the sky could keep, far below the palace walls. In the lower maintenance zone, Elias worked on machines like nothing had changed. But his eyes no longer looked at wires. They searched the walls for cameras, the floor for hidden traps, and his mind burned with one question. How do I get her out? He tried to ask questions, quietly, carefully, but no one wanted to talk. People were afraid. One wrong word and they'd vanish. Still, a few brave voices whispered back. An old servant in the palace, a smuggler hiding in the ventilation shafts, a wounded guard who hated the Empire but loved music from them. Elias learned of a forgotten tunnel system deep under the city, old escape routes from the war days. Most were sealed, but one remained open, barely. It led from the palace garden to a broken-out docking bay near the outer cliffs. But there was a problem. The garden was now guarded by elite sentinels, and no one entered without DNA approval. Elias needed her help. He had to see her, but every path was blocked. Then fate gave him a small window. A minor power glitch in the outer courtyard shut down the cameras for 7 minutes. It was not much, but it was enough. He slipped into the palace laundry chamber, changed into servant clothes, and climbed a shaft that led near the princess's private meditation room. Kazira was sitting on the floor when he entered. She turned, eyes wide, but did not scream. She stood quickly and ran to him, grabbing his sleeve like he might vanish again. Her voice shook when she whispered his name. He spoke fast, showing her a small hollow map of the tunnels and the docking bay. She stared at it, memorizing every detail. She didn't ask if it was dangerous. She didn't ask what came after. She simply said, "When?" 3 nights from now, Elias replied. "There's going to be a distraction in the reactor zone. I'll trigger a blast. They'll send everyone to stop the fire." "That's our moment." Kazira looked into his eyes. "You don't have to do this. You'll be hunted forever." Elias smiled. "So will you." She touched his hand. This time she didn't let go. Suddenly, a sharp buzz filled the air. A camera came back online. A red dot appeared on the wall. Elias grabbed her wrist and ran for the shaft, crawling down as alarms began to echo above them. Back in his quarters, Elias packed everything he would need: food rations, oxygen masks, a stolen security pass, and one last thing: the wind chime he had given her. He had made another, for himself. Meanwhile, Kazira faced punishment. Not physical. That was too obvious. The High Warden instead locked her in silence. No visitors, no speaking, no sunlight. She ate in the dark, slept in the cold, and every hour a voice whispered through the walls, "You belong to the throne." But her heart kept saying something else. Run. 3 nights later, the explosion shook the palace. A burst of blue fire lit up the horizon. Panic filled the air. Guards ran. Alarms screamed. Lights blinked and failed. In the chaos, Kazira slipped out of her chamber in stolen armor. Face hidden beneath a helmet, Elias met her near the garden wall. He didn't recognize her until she spoke. "You're late," he laughed. Even now, she could joke they ran through the secret gate into the underground path. The tunnel was old and filled with broken lights and dusty walls. They moved fast, but every second felt like a blade on their backs. Above them, the Empire would be hunting. Below them, freedom waited. But as they reached the halfway point, a loud voice rang through the old pipes. "Stop right there!" A squad of Imperial sentinels blocked the exit. Guns raised. No mercy in their eyes. Kazira stepped forward, slowly removed her helmet. Her crown hair glowed in the emergency lights. The soldiers hesitated. This was their princess, and then Elias stepped beside her, holding a stun grenade built from scrap. He whispered, "Close your eyes," and threw it into the light. The punishment chamber. The flash of the stun grenade lit the tunnel like lightning in a storm. Kazira closed her eyes just in time. But even through her lids, she saw the white fire. The guards screamed as their vision burned, some firing wild shots into the walls. Elias grabbed Kazira's hand, pulled her through the smoke, and didn't look back. The exit tunnel twisted downward. Pipes hissed. Alarms blared from above. But freedom was close. The docking bay was just past the final gate, where an old cargo lift stood rusted and silent. Elias punched in the override code he'd stolen. The system groaned. Sparks flew. For a moment, it didn't move. Then it did. The lift took them up through a narrow shaft. Kazira leaned against Elias, her breath shaky. Her robe was torn, her armor cracked, but her eyes still held fire. When the lift opened, they were almost blinded by sudden starlight. The bay had no roof, only sky, and in that moment, Kazira tasted freedom again. But it lasted only seconds. From behind a pile of scrap metal, an EMP net shot out like a spider's web. It wrapped around them both, and before Elias could reach for his toolkit, everything went black. He woke up first, in a cold chamber with metal walls and no windows. His hands were bound behind him. Blood dried on his lip. His bag was gone. Kazira was not there. He screamed her name. Guards entered, beat him without a word. Then left time passed. Or maybe it didn't. There were no clocks in the punishment chamber. Just the soft hum of pain. Kazira woke up somewhere else, in the Hall of Judgment, standing before a silent crowd of officials. The Emperor's seat was empty, but his voice echoed through a speaker. "You were bred for duty. You were trained for obedience. You are not free, Kazira. You never were. And now you have made a choice that demands consequence." The High Warden stepped forward. His voice was sharp and cold. "You will not die. That would be too easy. You will remain here, locked, watched, broken, until this infection leaves you." Kazira did not flinch. "I am not infected," she said. "I am awake." That was enough. They dragged her away to a smaller chamber, wrapped her in memory wires, and forced her to replay her treason over and over. Her smile, her laugh. The moment she touched Elias's hand, a machine fed the memory back into her mind like poison. The idea was to break her slowly, but she refused to break in the lower chamber. Elias was given a task. Not freedom, not death, something worse. They handed him a terminal, a broken weapon system, and a silent message. "Fix it, or she suffers more." He worked without eating, without sleeping. But he was not rebuilding the weapon. He was rewriting the entire system, creating a hidden backdoor, a code that would unlock the royal chains, a virus that would melt the AI walls from the inside. He called it Project Windchime. Kazira could feel something shifting in the wires around her. The punishment loop started glitching. The voices stuttered. Her memories blurred. A door deep in her mind began to open. And through it, she saw Elias's face. Not in pain, not in fear, but smiling. The High Warden noticed the change. He entered her cell personally and sat across from her. You will not win. Love is not stronger than power, he said. Kazira looked up. Her voice cracked, but it was still her own. Then why do you fear it so much? He slapped her. Hard, but even. As her head turned, she was smiling now. In the chamber below, Elias finished the last line of code. He uploaded it through the old royal systems using a cracked AI relay. It would take 6 minutes to reach the central core. That's all he needed, but the guards came early. They stormed in, grabbed him, and dragged him to the public square outside, the palace. The emperor wanted a show, a warning to all. They chained Elias in front of the palace tower. Crowds of nobles and officials watched. A platform rose behind him. It was shaped like a stage. And on it, another prisoner appeared. Kazira, she was dressed in white now, her arms bound. Her face was calm. The emperor's voice came again. You both chose disobedience. And now, you will both face its final lesson. The crowd waited for blood, but something else was coming. The sky shimmered, lights blinked, and suddenly, every screen in the palace turned blue. Wind chime activated. The rising flame. The palace screens turned blue one by one. First, the central tower. Then, the data halls. Then, the watchtowers and drones. The crowd murmured. No one knew what was happening. The emperor's voice cut out mid-sentence. Silence spread like smoke. Then came the sound, a soft, gentle chime. It was the same sound Kazira had heard in her private chambers late at night. The wind chime Elias gave her, but now it was louder, brighter, filling every corner of the Empire's command grid. And something incredible followed. The chains around Elias's wrists unlocked with a hiss of steam. He fell forward but caught himself. The guards ran toward him, shouting, but their rifles froze. Their targeting systems failed. One by one, their suits powered down in the center of the square. Kazira's bindings melted into light. The wires around her body snapped like paper. Her white robe fluttered in the sudden wind. She stepped forward, eyes blazing. What is this? One of the nobles whispered. A hidden rebel in the crowd answered in awe. It's a virus, a freedom virus. Elias stood tall beside her, bleeding, bruised, but alive. He held up a small device, the backup key for wind chime across the city. Power grids crashed. Drones dropped from the sky. Guard towers short-circuited. In the lower sectors, slaves and workers looked up at the screens. For the first time, they saw the princess not in chains, not silent, but standing free beside a human. Hope caught fire. Kazira raised her voice. She didn't yell. She didn't command. She simply spoke. They built this world on fear, but fear dies the moment you believe you deserve more. Her words echoed through every speaker across the empire. In the shadows of the palace, old allies began to move. Engineers who had lost their families to the throne. A cook who had once served poison under order. A pilot whose sister was executed for smiling at an outsider. All of them moved now. The first explosion hit the West Tower. The second tore through the outer walls of the punishment wing. Rebels poured out of hiding. The Empire's elites screamed as their private guards turned against them. But the High Warden had not fallen. He emerged from the control tower wearing the black armor of the Royal Enforcer. His eyes glowed red with the last backup AI still running in his neural net. He charged toward Elias and Kazira with a pulse spear crackling in his hands. Elias moved to protect her, but she stepped in front of him. No, she said quietly. This is mine to finish. The High Warden raised his spear. Kazira reached to her side and pulled out a thin blade made from palace crystal. Ceremonial, but still sharp. They clashed in the center of the square. Sparks flew. The crowd scattered. Kazira moved fast, not like a trained warrior, but like someone fighting for breath, for voice, for the right to exist. The warden struck again and again. Kazira blocked each one. Barely. Her arms shook. Her legs buckled. But she would not fall. Elias watched, frozen, fists clenched. He couldn't help her now. This was her battle. Finally, the warden grabbed her by the neck, lifting her into the air. "You were born to obey," he growled. Kazira didn't struggle. She didn't scream. She just whispered, "And you were born afraid." Then she stabbed the crystal blade through his chest. The AI in his body sparked, flared, and died. He dropped to his knees, then hit the ground, smoke rising from his armor. The silence that followed was not empty. It was sacred. Kazira turned to the crowd. They were no longer just watching. They were listening. She reached for Elias's hand and pulled him close. "This man saw me when no one else did. He reminded me that I am not a symbol. I am not a tool. I am not a prisoner. I am free." Cheers erupted from every level of the city. The people had waited for someone to speak these words. Now they were ready to follow. Elias turned to her and smiled. "So, what now?" Kazira looked at the palace towers burning in the distance. "Now we build something new." Together, and in that moment, two sparks, one human, one alien, lit the fire that would change a galaxy. The choice of freedom. The fires burned through the night. Smoke climbed into the stars like a flag of rebellion. The palace, once a place of golden control and cold silence, now stood broken. The throne room's roof had collapsed. Its marble floors cracked open, revealing the tunnels beneath. Tunnels where slaves once hid and whispered dreams of escape. Princess Kazira stood at the highest balcony of the command tower, now open to the wind. Her robe was torn at the hem, her hair wild from battle, but her eyes were steady. Below her, the people of Varthon were gathering. Aliens, workers, rebels, even former guards who had thrown down their weapons. They looked up at her not with fear, but with something new. With belief. Elias stood beside her, his hand wrapped in cloth, still healing. He had refused medical help until Kazira was safe. When he looked at her now, it wasn't as a mechanic looking at a princess. It was something simpler, something real, but the moment of peace couldn't last. A messenger drone flew in fast, broken and shaking. The message it carried was short. "The Emperor is coming." Kazira closed her eyes. She had expected this. She knew the Emperor would not let her rebellion go unanswered. But what she didn't know was that he had authorized orbital lockdown ships were already moving in. The sky darkened as massive cruisers cast shadows over the city. The people watched with rising fear. What could one broken city do against an entire empire? Elias turned to her. "We have to go. There's still a path through the old transport tubes. I can get us off-world. You don't have to die here." But Kazira didn't move. Her voice was calm. "If I leave now, they will hunt you. They will burn everything we started. They will make my name a curse." Elias shook his head. "I don't care about that. I just care about you. We can run. We can find a place the Empire forgot. Somewhere with oceans and trees and no thrones." Kazira smiled softly. "You still don't understand. I don't want to run anymore. I want to choose, and my choice is not fear." Below, the rebels waited for her decision. One word and they would scatter. One word and they would stand. Suddenly, a child's voice shouted from the crowd, "Tell us what to do, princess." Kazira stepped forward. Her voice didn't need a speaker. Don't wait for orders. You are not tools. You are not servants. You are not weapons. You are people. And people can build new things, if they dare to believe they can. Elias watched her. Something in his chest ached. He had never met anyone like her. She had been locked in a cage her whole life. And yet now, standing under a sky filled with warships, she was more free than anyone he'd ever known. But the Emperor's army was close. Dropships began descending beyond the mountains. The air was filled with thunder. They had only minutes left. Kazira turned to him. You once asked what I would do if the rules felt like chains. Elias nodded, remembering. I said I would break them. He whispered. She smiled. Then help me break the last one. They moved fast, through the ruined hallways, down into the old data center. Elias connected to the wind chime system again. There was one final command hidden deep inside. A signal that could send a message across every channel of the Empire. Kazira recorded her words in one take. No script, no edits, just her truth. I am Kazira of Zelari. I was born to obey. But I learned to live. The Empire taught us that silence is strength, but I have found my voice, and I will not quiet it again. If you hear this, you are not alone. If you feel trapped, you are not weak. You are just waiting to rise. Elias launched the signal. Every screen, every terminal, every communication node in the outer systems lit up with her face and voice. The Empire tried to stop it, but Windchime had learned too much. It danced through firewalls and satellites, spreading faster than fear, and something strange began to happen. Other planets responded, quiet messages, hidden rebels, secret soldiers, even a few alien warlords who had long hated the throne. All of them began to move. Not for Kazira, not for Elias, but for the idea that maybe the Empire could be undone as dawn broke. The first of the Emperor's ships landed outside the city. Armored soldiers marched forward, weapons ready. But so did the people, not with guns, not with bombs, but with unity. Elias stood beside Kazira, holding the small wind chime in his hand. She reached out and took it, and then she said the words that would echo across history. Let them come. We are not afraid anymore. A new sky. The ground trembled as the Emperor's army marched toward the city ruins. Their boots hit the dirt in perfect rhythm. Above them, giant warships floated like gods of fire and smoke. Their lights painted the broken palace gold again. But this time, that gold looked like the glow before death. Kazira stood with Elias at the edge of the courtyard where it had all begun. The wind blew dust across her face, but she didn't blink. She had taken off the last symbol of royalty, the necklace that once marked her as the next ruler of the Zelari Empire. She didn't need it anymore. She wasn't anyone's heir. She was her own voice now. All across Varthan, the people prepared. Not with weapons of war, but with something the Empire had never taught them. Courage. The rebels welded shields from scrap metal. Engineers hacked into old defense towers. Children carried messages through the underground paths. A city once ruled by silence now moved like a living heart, all beating for one truth. They would not go back in the center of it all. Elias adjusted the frequency towers. He had one last piece of wind chime to activate, a signal jammer strong enough to disrupt the Emperor's battlefield AI for just a few minutes. It wasn't enough to win a war, but it was enough to take a stand as dawn rose behind the enemy line. The first line of Imperial troops stepped into view. Towering soldiers in exosuits, tanks with pulse cannons, drones buzzing like angry wasps, and behind them, the black and silver banner of the Emperor himself. A voice rang out from their ranks. Artificial, cold, unshakable, By order of the Empire of Zilari, surrender the traitor Kazira and the human known as Elias. Refusal will result. In planetary cleansing, Kazira didn't move. She stepped forward alone, her feet bare against the cracked stone. She spoke without shouting, but her words traveled like lightning. I am not a traitor. I am the truth you tried to bury, and I am not alone. From every rooftop, from every alley, from every broken window and tunnel, the people rose. Some held spears, some held tools. Most held nothing but resolve. They surrounded the courtyard, silent, waiting. Elias stepped beside her and activated the jammer. The Imperial troops paused as their systems blinked. Just for a moment, the Empire's perfect machine stuttered, and that moment was enough. A rebel squad leapt from the side towers, taking out the first tank's control system. Smoke poured into the sky. Drones spiraled down. The people charged, not to destroy, but to defend what they had become. Kazira led them, not from behind, not from safety, but from the front. Her voice, her strength, and her presence gave others strength. She ran into the chaos with Elias at her side. The palace steps became the front line. Flames danced, steel clashed, and the Empire's perfect plan began to fall apart. But war is never simple. A second wave landed near the southern ridge, bypassing the main gates. Elite soldiers moved straight toward the palace, toward Kazira. She was cornered. Elias fought hard, using stolen weapons, shielding her when the blasts came close. But there were too many, and one soldier got through. He raised his weapon at her chest, but before he could fire, a roar shook the walls. One of the city's broken cargo mechs, long thought useless, charged in at full speed. A teenage girl was piloting it, barely trained, half crying, but fearless. She smashed the soldier against the wall, saving Kazira's life. The rebellion wasn't led by warriors. It was led by the unheard, by the forgotten, by those who had never mattered. Until now, by midday, the Empire's forces began to fall back. Not because they were overpowered, but because they didn't understand what they were facing. Not rebels a movement. The Emperor's voice tried one last time to control the battlefield, but Windchime twisted his signal. His final words, silence, her forever, were broadcast across 1,000 worlds, and those words did the opposite. More planets joined, more uprisings began, more voices rose. The Empire cracked, and Kazira stood in the middle of it all, alive, breathing, not just a princess, now, not even a queen. Something greater, a symbol of what comes after fear. When the smoke cleared and the ships left Varthon's skies, the people gathered once more. Elias stood beside her, his hand still holding the wind chime. She turned to him and whispered, "We were supposed to run. I was supposed to hide." Elias smiled, wiping dust from her cheek. "But instead, you lit the fire." Kazira looked at the horizon. For the first time in her life, she saw a sky without chains, a future not written by others. "Then let's build the world we never had," she said. He nodded, and together, under a new sky, they walked forward. Free, equal, unbroken. Not the end, just the beginning.